Want to do better? Then it's time to change the story. Welcome to our show about new visions currently transforming the world through the confluence of art, tech, and innovation. And now your hosts, Michael Ashley and Neil Sahota.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Changing the Story. I'm really stoked for our guest today, Ryan Patel. He's a trusted authority on global business, the political economy, and planning for long-term growth. An expert on scaling businesses and driving cross-functional collaboration, he's worked for startups to publicly traded companies. His deep knowledge in strategic global market development, concept scalability, digital transformation, Fintech, consumer-driven technology, has made him a thought leader in the global business realm. He's a CNN contributor, board of director, and senior fellow with the Drucker School of Management at Claremont Graduate University. Hey, welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me. That's quite an intro, so I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, Ryan. Ryan, as a visionary, what is the story that you want to bring to the world?
I think one of the things that for me, it's like we're all in this together in a global community. And when I say that, that doesn't mean necessarily the point of view to say, hey, that sounds like a sappy tagline. What I mean by that is we have to include all different perspectives. And let me dive that into a little deeper. I think jobs and industries are more intertwined than ever. And I also feel, and I'm a little bit biased because my background is kind of, I guess, multifaceted. It's just doesn't live in one sector. I feel like the knowledge base for everybody moving forward is that you do have to understand what other departments are doing, what other industries are doing. I think you don't need to be an expert in all those things, but I think having that conversation and understanding what, maybe retail and tech does, what does cybersecurity and, healthcare matter, they could easily be something in your mind that was separate industries, but we're seeing that they've always come together. And for me, I've always been a believer of that, just like in social responsibility and in for-profit businesses, there's a way that you can make money and still give back and still be genuine about it. And I think that's the story that I feel is changing. And I'm really excited about that story changing. Sometimes I feel like it's not fast enough, even including, gender equality and even different age gaps and different knowledge bases, even on board governance and what that looks like on a conversation-wise too.
I recently read a book called Range, and they were talking about this tendency, especially in academia, to silo disciplines. And they were talking about the economic incentives behind it, where if you're a specialist, for instance, if you're a doctor, that if you're the only one or one of the only ones that does what you do, you can, of course, charge more. But it sounds like you're saying that we need to have, basically society, that we need to emphasize more polymaths, people that are able to have a broad range of knowledge and expertise, and how that will benefit our culture. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think from a skill set as an individual, right? I mean, I know I'm going to get probably tweeted at all the marketers in the world saying, you just said, Ryan, the opposite of specializing your niche. No, yeah, you do have to be good, specialize in a certain degree on what you're doing. But what I'm saying is, if you think about corporate America, you think about the average, you think about innovation and these ideas, no offense to all the AI experts, but, they can't come up with all the greatest ideas. I think the ideas come and it can filter in a room with non-tech experts as well. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying as an individual right now, we're in the midst of, kind of in a lockdown. What is the best thing that you can do for yourself? And I think advancing your skill sets, not just in your niche, but in other places, and having that understanding of it, I think we as society would become better, right? I think we'll be more knowledgeable of social issues and just things that we've never had time to, versus just being so siloed, just focusing on just one thing.
I 100% agree, right? I think we often think other people think and act the same way that we do, and we know that's not the case, right? That everyone's got a little bit of different perspective and obviously the background. And if we could kind of get to know the other people, other perspectives a little bit more, right? I'm not saying be a master, but understand a little bit foundationally where they're coming from, it makes a huge difference, right? Because we always talk about we want to be more collaborative, but ironically, sometimes I feel like the more we specialize, the more siloed we actually want to becoming.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Everybody asks, well, why did you come up? not that this is a different thinking, but like you can tell for each person it's different. It means something. Like for me, understanding, and I'm not an engineer, but I've always been fascinated. My wife's an engineer, but they always look at things and problems differently. And guess what? I want to take that. I want to take that and add that to mine. And I think I kind of have, at least to the best of my ability. And that's why things like AI, machine learning, like I have taken owns to understand more of that and be able to. I can't say who yet, but hopefully it'll come out. But I'm writing a big report around fintech for a big publisher that hopefully will come out in a few months. And I'm so excited about writing it because it's come from my perspective of not just where the industry is going, but I love being in a room when there is different backgrounds, or maybe I'm this separate background, and talk about how do you scale something? How do you talk about consumer experience? Because it is all interrelated. And I don't know. I'm just biased because I feel like trends just don't start in one place, as one region of the world. It comes from all over the place. And because of my background of building and scaling companies globally, I always feel like you take those and you bring it back. You just don't start one place and push it on upon other people.
Absolutely. So, and how can we promote this kind of idea, this kind of type of thinking to our educational system? More and more, I feel like a lot of students are losing the ability to critically think about issues. They don't have the wider context as to why we do the things we do, and the wider context historically. How can we promote this kind of thinking in our schools to be more well-rounded?
Oh, I can tell you one thing, it's already happening. Now, I don't know how fast it's happening. I mean, you could talk about the pandemic, how that has just changed the way how people, do online. Everyone now goes, oh, look, everyone's doing Zoom calls now. It's like, well, we've been doing it for a while. Now everyone's just catching up. And I think part of that conversation has always been the back and forth between academia and professionals. Like, where's that balance? I think everybody, I mean, I'm going to say everybody, but there needs to be a balance. I think I think it's imperative. And then when you have, why I'm bringing up COVID-19 is that it changes the game. There is no answers to everyone. I mean, if you had an answer, we would already be doing it. Now it's the best. How do you really go forward? And I think academia has to be, if you're not going to get forced into this conversation, you will no longer exist. If you still, if there's institutions, which none of the ones I know well have said this, of like, well, we're only going to do the same thing we've always done. I've seen the great institutions making changes. Like, we're going to have more of a better mix. We got to understand what the current problem is, because academia typically gets picked on as well, never really trendsetters, right? Just kind of researching and looking back. And that's unfair, but I think the great academic folks are the ones that are balancing their knowledge base. So when the students come out of school, they know, right? It's not just about networking, which it is, but it's about, well, I'm familiar with that subject, or I'm familiar with that topic that is trending, right? And I think people are finally going to get pushed to talk about relevant things in the classroom, because guess what? It changes the next semester. I mean, if you took a class this past spring, the class that you're going to teach in the fall, it's going to be so much different. And I think it's imperative, right? And sometimes those writings and the research isn't as available as it should be.
100%. And I really love the energy, the mindset you're bringing here, Ryan. And my big question though is that even as we do these things, what about the company or organizational side? Where are they creating the culture to tap into the potential from this?
Yeah, not fast enough, I think. I mean, because how do you? I mean, the question with many of these companies, especially let's just say right now, where they're either it's like we were talking earlier, survival mode, or are they looking to do something in the future? And I've seen some great CEOs that I've spoken recently, that they're like, well, we're betting that it's us having some major layoffs. It's going to be hard for us in 2 months to get them all back. And so how do we do it in a way to create a culture of transparency? And many of those companies are having, they never had, company-wide calls on Zoom where they open up the forum for anyone to ask questions. They've never done that before. Now they're doing it. So people are CEOs are asking directly from no matter who, do I have my job? And I think that human culture is a good thing, right? It's a good thing because I think, to your point, you're now building it. So some people get afraid, like some execs get afraid, well, I've never had it now, and now if I start, it's too late. It's never too late. I think that's part of the culture that needs to happen. I think it's not going as fast as some of these bigger organizations need to be, but you'll see in the next 2-3 months. We just saw Hertz file for bankruptcy, and many of these other companies. They have to change the way that they do their model. And if their model's changing, I can assure you the culture is going to change with the people that they're going to need to bring in to doing this.
Change is
That's
hard though, right? I mean, I get a lot of companies are trying to keep the lights on and figure out how to survive, but it's like there's a golden opportunity to thrive, and you can't really just go back to the way things were in some industries. I
Well,
mean,
and it's so funny because I think I that that assumption on extreme both sides, I think people are like, well, it's going to have to change. And then there's some people who say, well, it's just going to go back. And the funny part of it is it's going to be both, right? Like, I don't want to tell everyone here, like, oh, yeah, everyone's going to learn and then they're going to move forward. Let's just be honest. No, some companies are going to go back to doing the same thing. You talk about, you know, the gyms, for example, the gym industry specifically, there's going to be people who want to go back into the gym and some people who don't. And how the gym industry is going to evolve in the in-person gym industry is what are they going to need to do, right? And it can't be always the same. And it'll be very interesting to see what lessons companies take from a technology perspective as well, specifically, and how they incorporate it going forward. Because you cannot just ignore what just happened. And I'm not saying you should change your whole model on like, well, if you're always working from home now and change it. I know some companies just can't do that. But you do need to have that conversation, unfortunately, and you need to have it transparently.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to go back to what you said just a moment ago, I thought it was very interesting about changing the culture. And it seems like this is very much an outgrowth of people like Brene Brown talking about the need for vulnerability. I've seen this with Vistage groups too, where we're talking about leaders that are more emotionally sensitive. They're more willing to be vulnerable to answer those questions you mentioned on the call. In the future, what do you think tomorrow's business leaders look like to you? How are they composed in terms of their emotional constitution, the way that they conduct themselves, especially with their team, to encourage innovation, to encourage people to be profitable, but also to be sensitive to the people that they're working with?
I mean, we've been hearing this word of empathy, right? People have to be more, have that to be a leader skill set. It's not a new thing. It's just, I mean, that you still had to be a good leader to have it. I think what that means now more so than ever is that leaders have to spend time on what that means. Like that, that definition means different for different people, and you have to do it in your own not just in your mindset, but in your own personality, right? And I think that's what we're going to see better leaders do. Like, you can't copy anybody. Like, you can try to, but people can tell that you're not real, and you're not fake. And I think saying that you make mistakes, saying that you understand what's going on, or don't understand the next generation. I think we're going to see more of that rhetoric come out. But again, it's if somebody doesn't necessarily want to share things like that, it takes a learning process. There's no on and off switch on saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to ask, hey, how's everyone's weekend? Like, that's just fake. Like, you don't care what I did and how. And then in the context of, does that matter, and how does that matter in your team, right? Like, you do have to spend some time on what you want to build and what is okay, what are the guardrails, and all of that, and how does that affect the business. I really do believe that that's integration that leaders will need to be better understanding of, not just what individuals are facing in the world today, because it's obviously changed from a year ago, but also in the future, what's things that can they help in, right? That helping piece, that ability and wanting to help and helping in the right way is important.
I would agree, and I think like you look at like Governor Cuomo got a lot of props, during the height of the pandemic, saying like, "Look, I don't have that answer. We don't know yet. We're trying to figure that out, and it's going to be bad, right?" And he seemed to get a lot of respect for at least being honest, not what people wanted to hear. But one of my big fears is, I think you're right, Ryan. Things should change, and a little bit more openness and real connections important. But I feel like as the country reopens and things reopen, people are going to revert back to the old ways. I mean, not that one or the other extreme is necessarily the right thing here, but you talk about balance. How do people figure out the balance?
Well, let me tell you one thing. Of course, they're going to go back. I mean, the fact that we're in let's just pick the U.S. example, and that women are not equal to men in gender equality and pay, that tells you something. Like, I don't need to know any other stat that says, well, will it go back? Will it not? Like, you look at the board governance on the S&P 500, only average age is like 60 plus, only 10% women, only 10% minorities. And you're telling me that the businesses, again, there needs to be a mix on the board. I'm not saying that you don't need people that are really seasoned. You need a mix of those things. And then now you're asking me, well, I'm afraid that it's going to go back. Of course it is. I think it's going to go back. And what needs to, I mean, it's not so much what needs to happen, but these kind of conversations within organizations are going to change this, right? It's who's going to solve the problem. I guess what? Don't expect one group to solve it for you, right? It's governments, it's companies, it's consumers. Let me tell you, consumers have a voice and they matter. Like, they can hurt you in the pocket. I remember saying this for, a couple years ago when I was on the United Airlines breaking news segment. And I said something along the lines, I was like, yes, I understand United is going to get their market share back, but this is going to change the overbooking policy forever. And I remember the anchors going, what are you talking about, Ryan? You're crazy. The top 4 airlines could do whatever they want to do because they've got the monopoly on it. I was like, but what's changed is the consumers have decided, I'm not going to fly with you for a few months, or I'm not going to do that. And that hurts the bottom pocket. That's what I think that's the wild card in this, Michael O'Neill, is that we as individuals do have some say in a different way, and we can share it because we live in a digitally connected world than ever.
Right. So can you give us some other examples? I think it's really interesting what you're saying. And I remember the incident exactly we were talking about with United, where consumers can be taking action, voting with their pocketbooks, if you will. What are some of the other things that they need to speak up in your mind, things that should change, especially in relation to what we're going through right now?
I think, don't you guys think diversity and inclusion is coming up in conversation because of who? I mean, I know everybody wants to talk about, well, leaders lead, right? CEOs have a vision, but the CEOs of companies like Apple, Tim Cook, and Microsoft, right? They're taking stances on social issues, they're not just doing it for themselves. They're doing it for their employees. They're doing it for their consumers. They're doing it because it is the right thing to do, but it's also because they're held accountable, right? And I think you even take a look at things of like going green on consumer packaged goods products. People are now reading or paying 10 cents more for something to say, oh, if I buy this, 1 day of clean day water is given. Or if I buy this, someone's fed. I think those kind of initiatives, especially I see a lot in the trends, obviously in the food, in the food industry, people are really trying to create a story about, oh, this is sustainable food, sustainable farming. Look at the plant-based industry right now with Beyond and Impossible Burger alone. Think about having this conversation 3 years ago. People were just like, well, that's just for meat. That's just for people who don't want to eat meat. Well, no, it's not anymore. It's an actual sustainable. People are doing sustainable farming in the Midwest, and now it's guess what? It's mainstream media now, right? I can say that plant-based foods are now mainstream media because I know I've been on it talking about it, and not from a perspective of being vegetarian or whatever the case is, just because people want to know, what does this mean? How is it added? I mean, would anyone want to believe it's now in Burger King, in QSR restaurants that always care about the cost and margins? And I think that's a conversation, not just because of someone's preference of food, right? That's something that the consumer overall wanted to have, right? It's not just, I remember, when people are lactose intolerant, they want lactose intolerant options, right? When they go to the ice cream store or frozen yogurt store. Well, but when people who are not lactose intolerant try the product, you're like, oh, wow, this is pretty good. I want to try this now, right? It does change the mindset a little bit, not to use that as an example, but I thought, it's one of those things that we're going to see more of, more vocal voices, right? Because it's going to be fair, even when you see speaker lineups at conferences. I think people are savvy enough to see, well, who is it? Do they look like me? Do they talk like me? What is it am I going for?
Well, I actually think this is a great opportunity. I know there's a lot of bad going on, but I've had this conversation a few times now where a lot of the now big companies got their start during a really bad spell, like Google and Airbnb and all that. And it's like you can either focus on the problems, or you can focus on the opportunities. But I think it was Rahm Emanuel that said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Right? You want to try and do something big or enact a big change. Now is the time to tap into that.
Yeah, it's great. I got asked this question the other day, like, how do you stay, people are having a hard time, all of us do. How do you stay positive, right? And for me, and I think you guys know, especially for me on LinkedIn and sharing the different topics that I share, it's I understand there's opportunity if you focus on what's going on right now and dwell on it. It's really easy to lose what is in front of you. And we've all gone through, many of us have gone through the recession and other kind of ups and downs in our careers. For me, it's also become second nature. It's like, yeah, I understand it's bad, but man, there's a lot of different places that we've never thought of. And if you let your mind open, if you let your mind actually think about things that you've done that you can do differently, you will come up with, I assure you, you will come up with something that you've never thought of in your mind, in the way that you look at things, the way you do things, the way you look at technology. I mean, it's funny how that conversation no longer, well, maybe you guys would disagree with me, before going in the pandemic, it was, is tech bad, is tech good? I don't really hear that conversation anymore. It's just, uh, and there's still a debate around that, but like, you're looking at what technology does, what it doesn't do. You should be the one deciding what that looks like, right? Not somebody else. And this is what an opportunity to be able to talk about that. And unfortunately, it's in this. Trust me, I wish that this was upon none of us, because I'm sure we would have been way better off in these places. But the question now becomes, how do we make this situation into a better situation, and how do we all recover together faster? And I'm hoping it pushes all of us to come together in that same mindset.
Right. So let's imagine that more people feel the way that you do. And let's imagine that we begin to have this recovery, that it looks like there's signs that it's actually even starting to occur right now. What does the world look like to you a few years from now based on what happened this spring?
This is a change, and I mean, I don't like to do predictions, but this is a change. It this has monumentally changed the way we look at things to the next generation. We're not talking about the next generation. I'm talking about the kids that are in elementary school, middle school, the future leaders. This event single-handedly just changed the way they looked at just health, specifically health, wellness. I think we're going to see in the next few years, and I'm hoping more around that, like how, what health insurance, like I think the health industry is going to get, I mean, I've said it, I think I said on Drucker Day last year when I hosted WHO and the healthcare industry, like it's going to get disrupted, but it hasn't been yet. I think in 2 years, this is it. Like this is the place that pushes us over to the place that healthcare is going to feel a lot different. I also think that us understanding, and this is more of a hope, us understanding different countries, the ability to trade, different people, I would hope that this puts us together in a conversation more. And why that's important for business. Well, I think it's important for the right thing, but I guess I sometimes have to break it down for the business perspective. Is that you can only come up with so many great ideas. And, how do you really adapt locally, truly? And I think people are going to open up more and see and have a little more empathy. And I think that in doing so, if there's more people thinking that way and cultivating relationships, not just looking at it as a short-term perspective, I think you will come up with new infrastructure ideas. I mean, people are talking about smart homes, you know, all these ideas that were already trending. The question becomes, is that yield curve faster now, right? Are we going to go that route faster? And in some industries, I think it definitely has opened up that conversation.
Well, it's really interesting because I think so, because some of the things that people are resistant to, like telemedicine or even online classes, now that they were kind of thrust into actually using it, they're now actually thinking two steps ahead and saying like, well, why aren't we doing VR classes? Why don't we have AI tutors? And why can't we have like a virtual physician's assistant helping to diagnose a patient at home? And it's funny to kind of see this 180 in the, I won't call it thinking, but the openness to these ideas. And I hope that's something that winds up becoming a sustained thing for our society. I mean, what are things that people can do to try and maintain that like mindset?
To remember that you had no choice. To remember that this point of time, and that's what I'm a little bit afraid of, is that once it says anything, when you are in hard times, you tend to forget as an individual how hard it was. Then you start thinking about it and go, oh wow, I went through a job loss, I went through a cut, I went through this twice. I don't want that feeling ever again. But the longer you're away from it, the longer you forget how bad it was, right? And I think, and it can't just take someone on TV giving you a constant reminder. I think it really does have to resonate with a mindset of shifting behind it. Of I don't know. It's interesting to me because I haven't seen, we're in the middle of this still, and what lessons people. I mean, I'm interested in what lessons actually people actually take from. Like, what are we actually learning that we are going to keep doing in the future? I mean, the funny you mentioned about telemedicine. I mean, let's talk about the delivery model, for example. Like, people now, the curbside delivery is real. Like, that wasn't even a real thing initially. Let's throw out Instacart and those guys who are obviously winning. But think about how it changed about Walmart's, and Costco's not there yet, but where you can just pull up and people just drop off groceries into your car, and that you're planning to do your grocery shopping 1 week in advance. That's not something that was in normal individuals' lives. And now you've just done it for 2 months. I am going to take a guess. There's going to be a strong percentage of those people who are going to continue to do it and continue. I mean, I even throw myself in that category where I don't necessarily use that option, but boy, did I like it. Like, I actually like it. So I'm sure there's a certain amount of people going, oh, that was convenient, easy. I don't have to always go in the store or go in the store. My brother's kind of funny. He goes, wow, this is cool. Like, you can put it in and we're winning. I'm like, there's no winning. They're still making money off of you. It just doesn't seem like you're going in there and spending an hour in there.
Absolutely. And I think also from a sociological perspective, I think I've heard from a lot of people that they just realized they were too busy and that they weren't spending time with their family and they weren't cooking at home. That's something we did it already a lot, but we're doing it much more now. And I feel much more connected to my family throughout this time. And I think that is another big wake up call that we're seeing amongst the population.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. At least for me, I'm so happy that people are a lot more open to like kids at home and family. Like, for me, not to say you always hide that. I've always had to always had to hide that prior to coming into this COVID thing, because now it's like, it's okay if your kid is in the background making noise.
Right.
And I know that's a personal thing for me. I always want to try to keep it professional, but now everybody's like, it's okay. And I'm like, oh, that's weird how that just changed in about 30 days. Right. That's now the norm. It's okay. Something in the background might, is messed up or something like that. And that is a step, I think, in the right place, right? Michael O'Neill, you were talking about what do we see change in the future? Like, I think that's a change. I don't think we're going to go back from that. I think people are going to be a lot more open about your family life when you're at home. And to the balance you said, Michael, I like that I could be more home and not sit in traffic, right? And I've always, at least in my life, and what I do, and I like to have that balance. I've always trying to fight it anyway to be not missing events for the kids, and I think we do a great job of doing it. But like, this makes it easier on me. I don't have to really decide. I can do both. I don't have to go grocery shopping for 2 hours. I can just take 15 minutes and come back and have more time for myself. My mind, also, not to keep going on this, but like, it's also, I wrote an article for Thrive that, this is the mental piece for each of us, like a reminder for us to find our own breathing, even if it's 5 minutes. I mean, just do it. 2 minutes for yourself, just to take the time to break out. And it's really hard. Like, people think it's really easy. Oh yeah, I'm going to find 5 minutes and let's just practice breathing and do nothing. Like, it's hard when you have a lot of people in the house or in the room, or if you're an individual by yourself, like, you have a lot of different things that you can do. And I think I'm hoping that that's one of the reminders that stick with me, that, you do have to take more breaks for your mind to think what's important, what's not, and actually doing it. It's one thing to actually understanding it, and it's another thing actually doing it.
I think that's actually fantastic advice. I tell my better half all the time, you got to make more time for yourself, and we all got to make more time for ourselves. And maybe that's one great thing that'll come out of this, unfortunate situation. But, Ryan, this has been fantastic. How do people learn more about you, what you're up to? What's the best way for people to follow you?
Well, come follow me on LinkedIn. Follow me. I'm at Ryan Patel Global on Instagram and Twitter. We, obviously got my website, ryanpatelspeaks.com. But, if you guys want to engage on content, we've got, I really do. I think we got some great LinkedIn community members that we're always talking about different things, and not just from learning from me, but if any of you all get a chance to read some of the comments on some of the subjects I talk about from the people, like these people are getting 40, 50 likes on some of the conversations. And I love that, right? The purpose is to learn from each other. The purpose is how different perspectives are going through. So if you want to see that, I think feel free, for sure, follow me on LinkedIn, because I think it's just a great community.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I can tell you that Ryan has some amazing posts. I'm always looking at them every day.
We definitely learned a lot.
Thank you.
We definitely learned a lot from you today. So thank you again, Ryan, for being on today.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks.
Hey, if you like today's show, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment.
If you've been enjoying the Changing the Story podcast series, please subscribe and share it with your friends.
Thank you.